Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship and looked out at the biggest space station he had ever seen. The Galactic Council Station Harmony was huge. It looked like a giant metal flower floating in space, with long arms reaching out in all directions. Bright lights twinkled along its surface like stars. "First time seeing something like this, Captain?" asked Lisa Park, his communications officer. She walked up beside him, carrying a stack of papers. "Yeah," Jake said. "Hard to believe we're really here. Humans meeting aliens for the first time as equals." The UES Phoenix had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. Earth had received the invitation 6 months ago. The message was simple. Humans are ready to join the Galactic Council. Please send representatives. Jake's crew was small but skilled. Lisa Park handled all communications and knew more about human history than anyone else on the ship. Ben Clark was their chief engineer, a man who could fix anything and always worried about what might break next. There were 12 other crew members, all picked because they were good at their jobs and could stay calm under pressure. "Docking request approved," Lisa said, reading from her tablet. "They're giving us Bay 7. That's apparently close to the main diplomatic areas." Jake nodded. "Good. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can see what we're dealing with." The docking process took an hour. The alien technology was different from human systems, but it worked smoothly. As soon as they were secure, Jake received a message asking him to come to the welcome ceremony immediately. The ceremony hall was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. Strange plants grew along the walls, and the air smelled like flowers and something else he couldn't identify. At least 50 different types of aliens filled the room. Some looked almost human. Others were completely different. Jake saw creatures with 4 arms, beings made of what looked like living crystal, and things that seemed to float in the air without any visible means of support. A tall, thin alien with blue skin and large black eyes approached Jake. "Captain Morrison, I am Ambassador Crix Vol of the Zilithian Republic. Welcome to Harmony Station." "Thank you," Jake said. "We're honored to be here. Please meet some of our other council members." Crix Vol gestured to a group of aliens nearby. "This is Elder Morthtel of the Morthak Confederation, and Dr. Yith Knoll of the Quinari Science Collective." The Morthak looked like a large, furry bear that walked on 2 legs. Elder Morthtel spoke in a deep, slow voice. "Humans are most welcome here. We have heard interesting stories about your species." Dr. Yith Knoll was shorter than the others, with green skin and 6 arms. 2 of his arms were always moving, taking notes on a small device. "Yes, very interesting. Your rapid technological development is quite unusual." Jake introduced Lisa and Ben, who had joined him for the ceremony. More aliens gathered around them, clearly curious about the new species. "We have a traditional question we ask all new members," Crix Vol said. "It helps us understand how different species think and plan. The question is, what's the worst that could happen?" Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "What's the worst that could happen?" Crix Vol repeated. "It is a standard greeting among council species. We use it to learn about risk assessment and planning capabilities." Jake looked at Lisa and Ben. Lisa raised her eyebrows, and Ben grinned slightly. Jake turned back to the aliens. "You want to know what's the worst that could happen? In general, or about something specific?" "In general," Dr. Yith Knoll said, his writing arms moving faster. "How does your species approach potential problems?" Jake thought for a moment. "Well, where do I start? On Earth we have a saying. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. We call it Murphy's Law." Several aliens made sounds of interest. Jake continued. "Throughout human history we've faced disasters that nearly wiped us out. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Diseases that killed 1/3 of our population. Wars that destroyed entire cities. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, droughts. We've learned that if something bad can happen, it probably will happen, usually at the worst possible time." The aliens were listening carefully now. Jake noticed that the conversations around them had gotten quieter. "So we plan for disasters," Jake said. "We build our cities to survive earthquakes. We store food for famines. We have backup systems for our backup systems. When we design anything important, we assume that everything will break down at once. Lisa stepped forward. Human history is full of examples. When the Black Death hit Europe, it killed millions because people weren't prepared. When the Titanic sank, it happened because they thought it was impossible to sink. We learned from those mistakes. Ben nodded. In engineering, we call it redundancy. If one system fails, you need another one ready. If that one fails, you need a third. I've seen human ships running on backup power from backup power systems, because the main systems and the first backup both failed. Interesting, Dr. Yithnol said. So humans actively plan for multiple system failures? We have to, Jake said. Earth is a dangerous place. We have storms that can level entire cities. We have volcanoes that can change the climate for years. We have animals that can kill you just by touching you. Our planet is trying to kill us all the time, so we learn to expect the worst. Elder Morth Tell spoke slowly. This is very different from Morthak thinking. We plan for success and expect systems to work as designed. That's great if your systems never fail, Ben said. But what happens when they do? They rarely fail, Crixvol said. Most Zilithian technology operates for centuries without problems. Jake and his crew exchanged glances. What happens if there's an accident, or a natural disaster, or someone makes a mistake? We follow standard procedures, Dr. Yithnol said. Our manuals cover most situations. Most situations? Lisa asked. What about the situations they don't cover? The aliens looked confused. Why would we plan for situations that are unlikely to occur? Jake realized this conversation was going in a direction he hadn't expected. Because unlikely things happen all the time. Just because something has never happened before doesn't mean it never will. Humans seem very cautious, Crixvol observed. We prefer to call it realistic, Jake said. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. That's how we've survived this long. The welcome ceremony continued, but Jake noticed that the aliens kept coming back to ask more questions about human disaster planning. They seemed fascinated by the idea that a species would spend so much time thinking about things going wrong. As the evening ended, Jake found himself talking to a small group of alien scientists and diplomats. They wanted to know more about human risk management, emergency procedures, and something they kept calling worst-case scenario thinking. It sounds like humans expect disasters, Dr. Yithnol said. We don't expect them, Lisa explained. We just know they're possible, and if you're not ready for them, they can destroy everything you've built. Jake looked around the room at all the different alien species. They seemed confident, organized, and peaceful. Their technology was obviously advanced, and their society appeared stable. But as he listened to their questions, he began to wonder, what would happen to these aliens if something went seriously wrong? If their careful plans failed, if their reliable technology broke down, if they faced a crisis their manuals didn't cover. Jake had a feeling that humans were about to become very popular consultants. 1 week later, Commander Amy Foster received a message that made her nervous. The Galactic Council wanted to run some tests with the human crew. They called them standard diplomatic scenario simulations and said all new species had to complete them. Amy was not like Captain Morrison. Where Jake was diplomatic and careful with his words, Amy was direct and always thinking about problems. She had been a military officer for 15 years before joining the diplomatic corps. Her job was to make sure human missions went smoothly, which meant planning for everything that could go wrong. What kind of tests? Amy asked Dr. Yithnol when she arrived at the testing facility. Simple problem-solving exercises, the Quinari scientist said. His 6 arms moved constantly as he spoke, 2 of them always writing notes. We present a scenario and you show us how humans would handle it. Very routine. The testing room was large and white with screens covering every wall. Amy brought 4 other crew members with her. Danny Rogers, the ship's pilot, Kate Sullivan, their medic, Tony Martinez, head of security, and Lisa Park, who had volunteered to observe. The scenario is straightforward, said Ambassador Crixvol, who was also watching. A routine supply mission encounters a minor technical problem. Show us your approach. The screens lit up with images of a supply ship approaching a mining colony on a distant asteroid. Everything looked normal. The ship was carrying food, medicine, and equipment to the miners. The ship's navigation system has a small glitch, Dr. Yith Knoll explained. It's showing the wrong approach vector. A simple problem with a simple solution. Amy studied the screens. The other alien observers were taking notes, clearly expecting a quick demonstration. Most species, they had explained, would contact the AUK mining colony for guidance, check their manuals for the correct procedure, and fix the navigation system according to standard protocols. Okay, Amy said, but first I need to ask some questions. Questions? Krixvoll looked surprised. What caused the navigation glitch? Amy asked. Does it matter? Dr. Yith Knoll replied. It's just a minor technical fault. Amy turned to her team. Danny, what could cause a navigation system to fail? Danny Rogers had been flying ships for 12 years. He started listing possibilities immediately. Power surge, software corruption, sensor damage, interference from solar radiation, sabotage, manufacturing defect, overheating. Wait, said Elder Morth Tell, the large furry alien who had joined the observation group. Sabotage? Why would you consider sabotage? Because people do bad things sometimes, Tony Martinez said. If someone wanted to hurt the mining colony, messing with supply ships would be a good way to do it. But this is just a technical problem, Dr. Yith Knoll insisted. How do you know? Amy asked. Has anyone checked? What if the navigation system was hacked? What if someone is trying to crash the supply ship into the colony? The aliens looked at each other. This was clearly not going the way they expected. Kate Sullivan raised her hand. What if the navigation problem isn't the real problem? What if something else is wrong and this is just the first sign? Like what? Krixvoll asked. Hull breach, Kate said. If the ship hit some space debris, it could damage both the hull and the electronics. The crew might be losing air right now. Amy nodded. Good point. Danny, if the ship is losing air, how long do they have? Depends on the size of the breach and the ship's volume, Danny said. Could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 6 hours. What if the mining colony is the problem? Lisa Park asked. What if they're under attack and can't respond to communications? Tony Martinez was already thinking tactically. Pirates could be jamming communications. They hit the colony first, then wait for the supply ship to arrive so they can grab it. 2. Amy walked closer to the screens. What if this isn't an accident at all? What if the navigation system is working fine, but someone changed the colony's position? Changed the position? Dr. Yith Knoll's writing arms moved faster. Moved the whole asteroid, Amy explained. If someone has the right equipment, they could push the asteroid out of its normal orbit. The supply ship would arrive at the right coordinates and find nothing there. The aliens were starting to look uncomfortable. What had begun as a simple 15-minute exercise was turning into something much more complex. Let's assume it's just a technical problem, Krixvoll said. How would you fix it? Which technical problem? Danny asked. We've identified at least 12 different things that could be wrong. Amy started pacing. Okay, let's work through this systematically. First, we need to figure out what's actually broken. Danny, run a full diagnostic on all ship systems, not just navigation. What? If the diagnostic system is also damaged? Kate asked. Good point. Run manual checks on all critical systems. Life support, power, hull integrity, communications. What if communications are down? Tony asked. Then we can't call for help, Amy said. We need to assume we're on our own. What's our backup plan? Emergency beacon, Danny suggested. What? If nobody receives it? Emergency landing on the asteroid. What if the asteroid is booby-trapped? Emergency escape pods. What if the pods are damaged too? Dr. Yith Knoll stopped writing. How many backup plans do humans typically prepare? Amy thought about it. For something this important? At least 20, maybe 30. 30? Elder Morthtel sounded shocked. You have to plan for everything, Amy explained. What if the ship's computer is infected with a virus? What if the crew is sick? What if the mining colony has been abandoned? What if there's a solar storm? What if the asteroid is actually a disguised alien ship? An alien ship? Crixvol looked confused. It could happen, Tony said. If I wanted to ambush supply ships, I'd disguise my ship as something harmless. The room fell silent. The alien observers were staring at the human team with something that looked like amazement and concern. In most species, Dr. Yeathnol said slowly, this exercise takes 15 minutes. You have been running scenarios for 2 hours. Amy looked around the room. Her team was still brainstorming, coming up with new problems and solutions. Are we taking too long? You have identified threats that our own security experts never considered, Crixvol admitted. Really? Amy seemed surprised. These are pretty basic worst-case scenarios. We haven't even started thinking about the really bad stuff yet. Really bad stuff? Elder Morthtel asked nervously. Lisa Park grinned. She hasn't mentioned black holes, time paradoxes, or hostile alien invasions yet. Time paradoxes? Dr. Yithnol's writing arms had stopped moving entirely. Amy waved her hand. That's probably not relevant here, unless the mining colony is doing temporal research. Are they doing temporal research? The aliens looked at each other with expressions that clearly said they had no idea what they had gotten themselves into. Perhaps, Crixvol said carefully, we should move on to the next exercise. Sure, Amy said. But first, do you want to? Here are 17 different plans for dealing with each of these scenarios. Dr. Yithnol made a sound that might have been a whimper. 3 months after the simulation tests, Captain Jake Morrison found himself on the Morthak homeworld for what was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange. The planet was beautiful, with purple skies and silver forests that sparkled in the light of their twin suns. The Morthak people were friendly, showing the humans their cities and explaining their peaceful way of life. Jake had brought a small team with him: Rachel Kim, their best engineer, Carl Hayes, a specialist in power systems, and Dr. Nina Walsh, a scientist who studied how different technologies work together. They were staying in the capital city, learning about Morthak culture and sharing stories about Earth. On their 3rd day, Elder Zorth Cole, the leader of the Morthak Council, mentioned something during lunch that made Jake's stomach tighten with worry. We have a small situation developing, Elder Zorth Cole said in his slow, calm voice. Our scientists tell us that our sun is having what you might call a solar storm. It should pass in a few days. Jake put down his fork. A solar storm? How big? Not very big, another Morthak leader said. We have had them before. Our energy grid is built to handle such things. Rachel Kim, who had been quietly eating, suddenly looked up. What kind of energy grid do you use? A very good one, Elder Zorth Cole said proudly. It has worked perfectly for over 300 years. Very reliable. But what happens if it fails? Rachel asked. The Morthak leaders looked confused. It does not fail. It is designed to work. Jake felt that familiar feeling he got when something was about to go wrong. Elder Zorth Cole, can you show us how your energy system works? Of course. But why do you ask what's the worst that could happen? It is just a small solar storm. Jake and his team exchanged quick looks. They had heard that question before. An hour later, they were standing in the main power control center for the entire planet. The Morthak technicians were proud to show off their system. It was impressive, clean, efficient, and beautifully designed. Everything was connected in perfect harmony. This is amazing, Dr. Nina Walsh said, looking at the displays. But I have a question. What happens if your main power grid gets overloaded? It cannot get overloaded, the chief technician explained. It is designed to handle normal solar activity. But what if the solar storm is bigger than normal? Rachel asked. Then our backup systems will activate, the technician said. Where are your backup systems? Carl Hayes asked. The technician pointed to a smaller control room next to the main one. Right there. If the main grid fails, the backup grid takes over automatically. Rachel was already moving toward the backup control room, her tablet out and scanning the equipment. After a few minutes, she came back with a worried expression. Jake, we need to talk. Now. They moved to a quiet corner. Rachel spoke in a low, "Please." Their backup system is connected to the same power source as their main system. If the main grid gets overloaded, the backup will get overloaded too. That's not good, Carl said. What else? Rachel checked her notes. Their backup system is also smaller than their main system. Even if it doesn't get overloaded, it can't handle the full power needs of the planet. Dr. Nina Walsh was running calculations on her tablet. If their power goes down, what happens to their food storage? Food storage? Jake asked. Most of their food is kept in refrigerated warehouses, Nina explained. If the power fails, the food starts to spoil. And it's almost winter here. Their growing season is over. Jake felt his heart rate increase. How long can food last without refrigeration? In this climate? Maybe 3 days before it starts to go bad. A week before it's completely spoiled. Carl was studying the power grid layout on his tablet. It gets worse. Their water treatment plants run on the same grid. No power means no clean water. And their heating systems, Rachel added. Winter is starting. Without heat, people will freeze. Jake looked around the control room. The Morthak technicians were working calmly, not seeming worried at all. They were following their standard procedures, confident that their reliable systems would handle the solar storm just like they always had. How long until the solar storm hits? Jake asked Elder Zorthkol. About 30 hours, the Elder replied. Why do you look concerned? Jake took a deep breath. Because if your main power grid fails, your backup system will fail too. And if both systems fail, your people will have no power, no heat, no food storage, and no clean water going into winter. Elder Zorthkol blinked slowly. But our systems do not fail. They've never been tested by a solar storm this big, Rachel said. What if this one is different? We follow the procedures, the chief technician said. The manual tells us what to do. What if the manual is wrong? Carl asked. What if the people who wrote it never imagined a solar storm this powerful? Dr. Nina Walsh was still running calculations. Jake, if I'm right about their food storage, and if this storm lasts more than 2 days, they could be looking at planet-wide starvation. Starvation? Elder Zorthkol looked shocked. From a solar storm? Not from the solar storm directly, Jake explained. From all the things that break when the solar storm hits your power grid. Rachel was already sketching backup plans on her tablet. We need to set up emergency power sources for critical systems, food storage, water treatment, hospitals. We need to move food supplies to locations that can stay cold without electricity, Carl suggested. Underground caves, maybe. We need to set up emergency shelters with independent heating, Nina added. Places where people can stay warm if their homes lose power. The Morthak leaders were listening with growing alarm. But these are very big preparations for a small problem, Elder Zorthkol said. It's only a small problem if everything goes right, Jake explained. We're planning for what happens if everything goes wrong. How often do things go wrong for humans? Asked another Morthak leader. Jake thought about it. Often enough that we always plan for it. The next 30 hours were the busiest in recent Morthak history. The humans worked with local engineers and scientists to identify critical systems that needed backup power. They helped move food supplies to underground storage areas. They set up emergency shelters and communication systems. The Morthak people were confused, but cooperative. They had never prepared for disasters before because disasters rarely happened on their peaceful world. When the solar storm hit, it was stronger than anyone had predicted. The main power grid failed within 6 hours. The backup system failed 2 hours later, just as Rachel had warned it would. But the emergency systems the humans had helped set up worked perfectly. Food stayed cold in the underground storage areas. People stayed warm in the emergency shelters. Hospitals continued to operate on backup generators. The storm lasted 4 days. When it was over, Elder Zorthkol found Jake in one of the emergency command centers they had established. Captain Morrison, the Elder said slowly, our scientists have run calculations. Without your preparations, we estimate that 60% of our population would have died. Jake looked tired but relieved. We're just glad we could help. But how did you know? How did you see problems that we could not see? Jake smiled sadly. Because on Earth we learned a long time ago that when someone asks, "What's the worst that could happen?" the answer is usually, "Something worse than you can imagine." Elder Zorthkol was quiet for a long moment. We will not ask that question again without being prepared for the answer. 6 months after the Morthak crisis, word had spread through the galaxy about the humans and their strange way of thinking. Species that had never heard of Earth before were suddenly very interested in talking to human advisors. Captain Jake. Morrison found himself busier than he had ever been in his life. The request started small. A Zilithian trade colony asked for help with what they called minor efficiency improvements. Commander Steve Parker took a team to investigate and found that their entire economic system was one computer virus away from total collapse. Within a week, the Zilithians had implemented 17 different backup systems that Steve's team recommended. On the agricultural world of Kepler 442b, Administrator Mary Johnson was called in to help with what the locals described as slightly unusual weather patterns. Mary took one look at their meteorological data and immediately started preparing for the worst hurricane the planet had ever seen. The locals thought she was being dramatic. When the storm hit 3 weeks later, it was exactly as powerful as Mary had predicted. Her preparation saved millions of lives. Dr. Alex Turner, one of Earth's best scientists, was working with a research team on Quantum Station Alpha when he asked his now famous question during what seemed like a routine experiment. "So," Alex said, looking at the quantum field generator they were testing, "what's the worst that could happen if we're wrong about these calculations?" Dr. Vex Nim, the lead Quinari scientist, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Dr. Turner, it is impossible to be wrong. We have checked our mathematics 17 times. Humor me," Alex said. "Let's say there's a mistake somewhere. What happens?" "The experiment simply would not work," Dr. Vex Nim explained. "The quantum field would fail to stabilize." Alex studied the equipment setup. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what. What if it doesn't just fail? What if it fails in a specific way? "What do you mean?" "Well, you're trying to create a stable quantum field, right? But what if instead of creating a stable field, you create an unstable one that keeps growing?" Dr. Vex Nim's writing arm stopped moving. "Growing?" "Yeah. What if the field doesn't collapse when it fails? What if it starts pulling in matter from around it?" The other scientists in the room were listening now. Dr. Yith Knoll, who had flown in specifically to observe human problem-solving methods, was taking notes frantically. "You are describing a theoretical impossibility," Dr. Vex Nim said, but he sounded less certain than before. "Theoretical impossibilities happen to humans all the time," Alex replied. "That's why we plan for them. Have you calculated what would happen if your quantum field started acting like a black hole?" The room went very quiet. "A black hole?" "Dr. Vex Nim whispered. "Micro-black hole," Alex corrected. "Probably wouldn't destroy the whole galaxy. Just this solar system." Dr. Yithnol was writing so fast that smoke was coming from his tablet. "Dr. Turner, are you saying this experiment could create a black hole?" "I'm saying we should check to make sure it can't," Alex said. "Better safe than sorry." The investigation that followed took 2 weeks. They found 3 separate calculation errors that, when combined, would have done exactly what Alex feared. The experiment would have created a micro-black hole that would have consumed the research station, then the planet, then eventually the entire star system. Dr. Vex Nim spent an entire day sitting in his lab, staring at the corrected calculations. When Alex checked on him, the Quinari scientist looked up with large, frightened eyes. "Dr. Turner," he said quietly. "How did you know?" Alex shrugged. "I didn't know. I just asked what could go wrong and followed the logic. That's what humans do." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, engineer Beth Santos was helping the Crystalline Consortium with what they called routine maintenance on their largest city. The city was built entirely from living crystal that grew and shaped itself according to the inhabitants' needs. It was beautiful and had worked perfectly for thousands of years. "The crystal network needs minor adjustments," explained Master Crystal singer Thalmor. Some sections are growing too quickly. Beth walked through the crystal streets, watching the walls slowly shift and change around her. What controls the growth rate? The harmony frequencies, Thalmor replied. We sing to the crystals, and they respond by growing in the patterns we need. What happens if someone sings the wrong frequency? That is impossible. We trained for centuries to learn the proper songs. Beth stopped walking. But what if someone makes a mistake? Or what if the crystals start responding to other sounds? Other sounds? Radio waves, engine noise, music from other species. What if the crystals can't tell the difference between your control songs and random noise? Thalmor looked confused. The crystals only respond to our voices. Are you sure? Beth asked. Have you tested that? The testing revealed that the crystals responded to any sound in a specific frequency range. Ship engines, communication systems, even music could trigger crystal growth. Worse, the crystals had been slowly becoming more sensitive over time. They were on the verge of responding to background noise from the city's own technology. If this had continued, Thalmor said after reviewing the test results, the entire city would have grown out of control. We would have been trapped inside our own walls. That's what we call a cascade failure, Beth explained. One small problem leads to a bigger problem, which leads to an even bigger problem. Similar stories were happening all across the galaxy. Humans were being called in to solve minor problems and discovering major disasters waiting to happen. Each success made more species curious about human methods. Captain Morrison received a report from Admiral West back on Earth. The report was 15 pages long and detailed 47 different near disasters that human advisors had prevented in just 6 months. Jake, Admiral West said during their video call, what exactly are you people doing out there? We're asking, what's the worst that could happen, and then making sure it doesn't happen, Jake replied. And the aliens never thought to do this. Before? Jake looked out the window of his quarters at Harmony Station. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going. Many of them were carrying human advisors to various worlds and projects. I don't think they needed to, Jake said. Most of these species evolved on stable worlds with reliable technology. They never had to assume everything would go wrong at once. But now they do? Now they're meeting us, Jake said with a smile. And we're teaching them that Murphy's Law applies everywhere in the universe. Admiral West laughed. Well, keep up the good work. Earth is getting requests for human advisors, faster than we can train them. After the call ended, Jake sat quietly in his quarters thinking about how much had changed. 6 months ago, humans were the new species trying to prove they belonged in the galactic community. Now they were the species everyone called when they needed to prevent disasters. His door chimed. Lisa Park entered carrying her usual stack of reports. More requests? Jake asked. 17 new ones today, Lisa said. The Thermal Collective wants help with their star harvesting project. The hive minds are worried about something they call thought contamination, and the timekeepers want us to review their temporal stability protocols. Jake rubbed his temples. Timekeepers? Please tell me they're not messing with time travel. I'm afraid they are. Jake sighed. Lisa, what's the worst that could happen if we help them? Lisa grinned. Do you really want me to answer that question? On second thought, Jake said, let's start with something easier. What's the worst that could happen with star harvesting? 1 year after humans first joined the Galactic Council, Ambassador Crixvol called an emergency meeting. Captain Jake Morrison had never seen the council chamber so full. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy were present, along with dozens of scientists, engineers, and officials who rarely left their homeworlds. Jake sat with his expanded human delegation. What had started as a small crew of 12 had grown into a team of over 200 human advisors spread across the galaxy. Admiral West had flown in from Earth specifically for this meeting, along with Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's leading expert on disaster psychology. This meeting is not about a crisis, Crixvol announced to the assembled delegates. This meeting is about the fact that we are not having crises anymore. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations. Jake noticed that many of the alien delegates were looking at the human section with expressions he couldn't quite read. Dr. Yeath Knoll stood up, his 6 arms holding different data tablets. In the past year, human advisors have prevented 847 disasters across the galaxy. These were not small problems. Based on our calculations, without human intervention, we would have lost at least 12 entire worlds and approximately 2 billion lives. The chamber fell, silent. The most remarkable part, Dr. Yeath Knoll continued, is that in every case we did not even know we were in danger. The humans identified threats that our most advanced computer systems never detected. Elder Morthtel of the Morthax stood slowly. The humans saved my world from starvation. But more than that, they showed us that our entire way of thinking was dangerous. We assumed our systems would work because they always had worked. The humans assumed our systems would fail because systems sometimes do fail. Ambassador Crixvol gestured to a large screen that descended from the ceiling. We have spent the last 6 months studying human psychology and history. What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about intelligence and survival. The screen showed images of Earth. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, massive storms, and other natural disasters. Every other species in this council evolved on stable worlds, Crixvol explained. Our planets had predictable weather, few natural disasters, and relatively safe environments. We developed intelligence to solve problems, but we learned to expect that our solutions would work. The images changed to show peaceful alien worlds, the crystal cities of the consortium, the floating gardens of the Zilithians, the perfectly ordered landscapes of the Kinari homeworld. Humans, Crixvol continued, evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them. New images appeared, massive ice sheets covering continents, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and scenes of early humans struggling to survive. In harsh conditions, Dr. Yeath Knoll took over the presentation. Earth experienced 5 major extinction events before humans evolved. The planet has ice ages, massive storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, and hundreds of species of dangerous animals. Humans survived not because they were stronger or faster than other species, but because they learned to assume the worst would happen and plan accordingly. Admiral West stood up from the human section. "If I may," he said, "what you're describing is something we call survival instinct. On Earth, the optimists died out. The pessimists lived long enough to have children." "Pessimists?" asked Crystal Singer Thalmor. "People who expect bad things to happen," Admiral West explained. "For humans, pessimism isn't a negative attitude. It's a survival tool." Dr. Sarah Martinez rose to address the council. "We've studied human psychology for centuries. Humans are naturally anxious because anxiety keeps us alive. We worry about things that probably won't happen because sometimes they do happen. We plan for disasters because disasters are part of our planet's normal cycle." The screen showed a timeline of human history: the Black Death, world wars, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, tsunamis, and other catastrophes. "Every few generations," Dr. Martinez continued, "something terrible happens to humans. We've learned to live with the knowledge that everything we build might be destroyed. So we build backup systems, we make contingency plans, and we always ask, what's the worst that could happen?" Elder Zorth Cole of the Morthax spoke next. "This explains why humans see dangers we cannot see. You are looking for threats because you expect threats to exist?" "Exactly," Jake said, standing up. "We don't see disasters because we're smarter than you. We see them because we're scared of them. Fear makes us careful." Crixvol nodded. "Our analysis shows that humans process risk differently than any other known species. When you encounter a new situation, you immediately begin calculating failure scenarios. This is not conscious behavior. It appears to be built into your thinking patterns. We call it Murphy's Law," Admiral West said. "Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. We've been living by that rule for so long that we don't even think about it anymore." Dr. Yeath Knoll displayed a new set of data. The results speak for themselves. Before humans joined the galactic community, We experienced an average of 12 major preventable disasters per year. This year, we have had 0. 0, someone called out from the audience. 0, Dr. Yithnol confirmed. Every potential disaster was identified and prevented by human advisors before it could cause damage. The chamber erupted in discussions. Some delegates seemed amazed, others worried, and a few looked frightened. Krixval called for quiet. This brings us to the purpose of today's meeting. The Galactic Council has reached a decision. From this day forward, all major projects, infrastructure changes, and technological developments must include human safety assessments. Furthermore, Elder Morthtel added, the question, what's the worst that could happen, is officially retired from diplomatic protocols. Why? Asked a young Quinari scientist. Elder Morthtel looked directly at the human delegation. Because when you ask humans that question, they give you answers that will keep you awake at night. Jake smiled. That's the point. Better to lose sleep worrying about disasters than to lose lives ignoring them. Dr. Yithnol raised one of his arms. Dr. Martinez, I have a question. Do humans ever feel safe? Dr. Martinez thought for a moment. Not really, we feel prepared, which is almost the same thing. And this doesn't make you unhappy? Sometimes, she admitted, but it keeps us alive. And now apparently it keeps all of you alive too. As the meeting ended, Jake found himself talking with Ambassador Krixval in a quiet corner of the chamber. Captain Morrison, the ambassador, said, I must admit that when we first met I thought humans were simply nervous creatures who worried too much. And now? Now I understand that your worry is a gift. You see endings where we see beginnings. You see failures where we see successes. You see death where we see life. Jake nodded. It's not a pleasant way to think, but it works. Indeed, it does. Krixval was quiet for a moment. I have one final question if you don't mind. Sure. What's the worst that could happen now that the entire galaxy depends on human disaster prevention? Jake's smile faded as he considered the question. After a long pause, he said, You really don't want me to answer that. Krixval nodded quickly. You're right. I definitely don't want to know. As Jake left the council chamber, he received a message on his communicator. It was from Earth, marked urgent. A new crisis was developing, and they needed the human approach to disaster planning. Jake read the message and sighed. Then he smiled and called his team together. All right, everyone, he said. We have a new problem to solve. And you know what that means? What's the worst that could happen, they said in unison. Let's find out, Jake replied.